that we are having in nursing in New Jersey. Well aware of the oversight committee that was held, and still was willing to come and talk to us. So Howard is not a nurse. He's the deputy director of the Division of Consumer Affairs. Howard's going to give you a little bit of an overview of what the division is and how the Board of Nursing relates to the Division of Consumer Affairs under the Department of Law and Public Safety. We also are expecting to have Barbara Blosing come in and do some of the nursing parts of the Board of Nursing. But Barbara's kind of stuck in traffic, so we're hoping she'll get here in time. If not, we're going to pump Howard to see if he knows a little bit more about nursing than he's willing to admit. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Pine, and again, please don't kill the messenger.
Thank you very much, Judy. Good afternoon, everybody. As Judy mentioned, I'm Howard Pine. I'm from the Division of Consumer Affairs, where I'm the Deputy Director. I'm going to give sort of an overview of the division, where it falls, some of the experiences, the scale of the operation for the Board of Nursing, and then I'm going to dive right into the application process itself, give quote-unquote some tips, and see what I want to explain to you and show you what our staff sees and what kind of problems they have with some of the applications that come in. And then, as Judy mentioned, Barbara hopefully will be here to talk about the algorithm, which I know nothing about. I just know the word algorithm, so we'll take it from there, and hopefully Barbara will be here in time. And just a little bit about my background. So I'm the Deputy Director for the last, I guess, about 2 years. Before that, I was the Assistant Deputy Director. So the division itself, as Judy mentioned, it falls under Law and Public Safety, which is under the Attorney General's office. The division, I'm going to call it, has different units because they go by different names, but the Division of Consumer Affairs has the Bureau of Securities under it. It has the Office of Weights and Measures, which are the little labels you see in gas stations. They check gas stations and supermarkets. They have the Office of Consumer Protection, which is probably what most people are familiar with. If you have a complaint about a bad suit, a car, being ripped off by some sort of business, you file a complaint with the Office of Consumer Protection. We have a charities registration section, and we have a home improvement contractor section. So we have a lot of different sections. And then on the other side of the house is where I'm situated. This is the Occupational Professional Boards. There are 47 occupational professional boards. I believe number 48 is starting soon. I think it's art therapy. We have about 700 to 750,000 licensees, of which 200,000 are solely based in the Board of Nursing. And you've probably heard these statistics before, but I'll just go through them again. There's about 140,000 RNs, LPNs combined, I believe, and don't quote me on this, it's something like 123,000 RNs and another 17,000 or so LPNs. And then you have 62,000 active home health aides right now. The numbers vary, obviously, during renewal. A lot drop off and then they reinstate, but right now that's where we're at about. So it's really about 200,000. You also have, I think at last count, something along the lines of 8,500 to 8,900 APNs. There's 400 forensic nurses as well, but I believe they have to be RNs to be forensic nurses as well. So I'm learning a lot. Needless to say, the Board of Nursing is our largest board by far in terms of numbers. The second largest is cosmetology. They have about 80 to 90,000 licensees. My job is to sort of oversee all 47 boards. Obviously, a lot of focus goes towards nursing. Not just because of the largest board, but as a healthcare profession, not to knock the plumbers or the electricians. These are life and death issues that the Board of Nursing deals with. We put a lot of focus on the healthcare related boards. So to just show you how many applications, I have some numbers and I just want to shoot them out so people understand with our staff what they're dealing with. We licensed in 2016 3,000 approximately, these are within 100 or so, about 3,000 people, RNs, via exam, and a little over 3,200 for endorsement. Those are RNs. LPNs, obviously the numbers are less. There's about 1,000 through exam, and only about 250 through endorsement. Not much coming through endorsement with LPNs. 2017, the numbers are running about the same. What's interesting is, when we do the studies, one of the issues that I'm sure I'll hear about is that, that there's a lot pending right now. We call it what we call the summer influx. And we did a study, and essentially the 3 biggest months, and it's going to be no surprise to people here, the 3 biggest months for exam are April, May, and June. And then we essentially license people. Our biggest 3 months of licensing are pretty much a month separated from that. So our big 3 months are July, August, and September, where we license the most people. During this 3-month stint, we license essentially 50% of all people all the applicants that come in, of all the people we license, in those 3-month period, we license half of them, all in those 3 months. For exam, endorsement runs a little bit. There is a month or two that have a bump, but they're a little bit more consistent across the year. But really what you see is the exam, obviously, because people are passing, or people are taking the exam. So you see a big influx for RNs, and then I guess, I learned recently that LPN programs, they apparently graduate a little bit later in the year, so they graduate, I guess, June and July, so you see the bump after that time. So these are the kind of numbers we're looking at. We licensed that number of LPNs, RNs. APNs, we licensed last year about 850. This year, we're already on track for probably, it's gonna be close to maybe 900 to 1,000. We're already at licensed 700. This is as of sort of the end of September. And home health aides, it varies year by year. It looks like we average between 7,000 and 9,000. And that's not licenses, that's certifications. And not to get into the home health aides, I know that's not the central focus here, but the home health aides, they have a 120-day temporary work permit, and then they get certified after that period. If they go through a criminal background check, they get certified. So the numbers are about 7,000 to 9,000 certified homemaker home health aides get certified each year. So those are the kind of numbers we're looking at. Judy asked me to talk about the online application itself a little bit, and just to give you a background on the online application, for a few years now, and I think this is going back to Mr. Hebert, when George Hebert was the executive director of the Board of Nursing, we implemented an online application, and you could do either. We had the paper application online, and you could do the online application, whichever way you wanted to do it. And for at least endorsement, it was about 50-50. This March, we moved to a new system. So as of, I believe it's March 8th, it's probably on the website somewhere, March 8th, 2017, we eliminated the ability for people to apply online via paper. On occasion, we still get paper applications from endorsement. It happens. I think probably in other states they have a stack of applications that schools have printed off, and so they're still sending them in right now. But in essence, all applications are online. The online application itself, I looked at it. I wouldn't say it's cumbersome. It's in line with most other states' applications. The one thing New Jersey has, and not all states have, and I'm sure you're aware of, is that we do a criminal background check, and I don't know the exact statistics, but I know it's more than half the states in the nation have the criminal background check, but I don't know the exact number. Just to give you a history of the criminal background check, in 2003, we started with any new nurse that came into the system, or actually any new medical professional, healthcare professional, they all have to go through the background check and get fingerprinted. In about 2005 or 6, based on the Cullen law, the legislature gave us 4 years to then go back and fingerprint every single healthcare professional, of which, according to the person who runs the healthcare reporting division, there were about 250,000 to 300,000 licensees that then had to subsequently, although they were already licensed, go through the fingerprint process themselves. Obviously, we're way past that, but I just wanted to give you a background of the fingerprint process itself. And I'll get into a little bit more about the fingerprint process a little bit later on. I'm assuming most people here, the exam application will be more familiar than the endorsement application itself, just because obviously we're in New Jersey, but I do want to go through the endorsement application itself and point out some of the issues we have with the endorsement application. The biggest one, which is the fingerprinting. I'll get into that in a little bit. I forgot to mention before my talk, I did bring many business cards. So at the end of the talk, if you have questions that you don't want to ask or you want to ask after the talk, just take my card. I do this at all the talks I do. I haven't done many nurses. I haven't done any for nurses. I've done some for home health aides, and I feel like it's good to get the email from somebody because I get the feedback. I get feedback from staff. I get feedback from when I get a complaint. But I really like to get the feedback from administrators or nurses in the field and saying this is the problem I'm having or this is the issue I have. So I really would appreciate if you take a card as well. Email me. I tend to get back to everybody within 24 hours. So please take a card at the end of the talk. I want to talk about the two applications now. So the application process itself is, as everybody's probably familiar, the exam application. I've learned a lot about this in the past. I've worked with the Board of Nursing, and I forgot to mention a little bit, even though I've been with the division for 8 years, I've worked on my first project when I came to the Board of Nursing actually had to do with the fingerprinting process itself and the kinds of criminal background checks, what was being revealed and what we would do with somebody who got arrested 37 years ago for shoplifting. These are the kind of things we dealt with when we had probably 100,000 nurses go through the fingerprint process all within a year or two span. Since that time, I've worked with Pat Murphy as board president, and with George and Dorothy and Joanne Leone, who was acting for a while now, Deb Zuccarelli, who's in an acting capacity as well, on various projects with the Board of Nursing. So I'm familiar with the Board of Nursing. I probably know enough to say something stupid and get myself in trouble, so I'll be very careful. But I want to jump into the exam application itself, and I've been talking with staff for a long time about the exam application. So I'm going to break this down into the exam application, the endorsement application, and then what the future, what we've seen from feedback we've gotten, and Sharon Joyce, the acting director, has come up with some ideas, and what we want to put out there in the next few months to help the process along. So for the exam application, as I mentioned, it's similar to other states, the online application. We've checked a few others. I don't think there's that many big differences. There's about 3 or 4 big issues that the staff see. The number one issue is the Pearson Vue, the vendor that actually administers the exam administers the NCLEX. And the issue that we've seen, let me take a step back. Staff say at least 1/3 of all applications come in deficient. And by deficient, it can mean missing a photo, immigration status, arrest, and I'll go into each one. But 1/3 of these applications come in deficient. They said the largest group of the quote-unquote deficiency is we get the application and they haven't registered for Pearson Vue. Now my understanding is you can register for Pearson Vue. The registration for Pearson Vue is good for 1 year. Our authority to test is good for 3 months. So the recommendation has been, and I'd like to emphasize this, is you have to register for Pearson Vue before you apply to the board. Because what happens is we get an application that isn't registered with Pearson Vue, so we can't issue the authority to test. That means that now the reviewer is going to look at another application. They're going to get a notification. The notification goes out, the person has to then register with Pearson Vue. This takes time, and it's all about narrowing the time. And the key point, I was talking to Judy before, and I'll harp on this several times, is it's going to sound weird, but you want as few points of contact with the board staff as possible. Not because they're bad, they work very hard. The problem is that if you have a deficiency, what happens is you get a deficiency notice, you get a letter in the mail, okay? We will be moving to more and more to online, but right now you get a letter from the mail. So the process is, the letter goes out, okay, say it takes 2 days for it to go out. Well, it's gonna take several days to get to you. Then you're gonna respond in kind, say it takes 2-3 days for you to respond. It's also gonna take now another week for us to get back, for it to get back to us. So now we've lost 2 to 3 weeks on the process just because, again, it's a minor number, but I was just talking to Judy before. Say you didn't put documentation for your name change. You didn't include a photo, things of that nature. So the fewer points of contact as possible is key. If you get a complete application, it's much easier to process. So number 1 is Pearson Vue. We recommend that everybody registers with Pearson Vue before they apply, even if it's 4 days in advance. Now, my understanding, and Ben and Judy, and anybody can correct me, is that you don't have to have graduated to actually register with Pearson Vue. That's what I've been informed. So in my recommendation, and we're going to be talking to the schools as well, but if you're graduating May 1st, there's no harm. I understand it's a burden because it's several $100s, but maybe you just pay the registration, knowing that you're going to graduate and you're going to take the exam. You pay for the exam April 15th, or you pay for the exam April 1st. You have a year for the registration to be good. So that's number 1. That's the biggest category of problems we see, the staff sees with the applications. The second largest category, they said, is the fingerprinting itself. The number of arrests and/or convictions. Somebody might check off yes on the application, or they might check off no. The people that check off yes, they're not providing if you look at the application, it says please provide all documentation. Please provide the court records, the police records. You have to provide that. You'll have to provide documentation of rehabilitation depending on, obviously, the incident itself. But again, if you say check off yes and you don't provide the documentation, you're going to get a deficiency letter. The deficiency letter is going to say, please provide all these documents to the board. It may be reviewed by the board, not the board staff, but the actual board of nursing at some point, obviously depending on the incident, the arrest and/or conviction. So that's a big deal. I say err on the side of caution. Obviously, tickets for parking tickets, you have to use your discretion, but err on the side of caution. We do both a federal and state check. The fingerprint system goes through a vendor called Morpho Trust, which you'll probably, changes its name, but I think it's called Morpho Trust now. Changes its name every 2 years. They do a federal and state check when you initially get licensed. Providing all the documentation with that arrest or conviction is key. Again, another big factor that the staff see, that they're either checking off yes, or in another scenario, they check off no, and the fingerprint, the check comes back, and you have an arrest. It might be for 17 years ago. You might have thought it was expunged. This is things that they hear a lot. They say, I thought it was expunged. I thought it was this. I never went to jail. I never did this. It's better to err on the side of caution and put it out there, because once you check off the no, then you have something that's what we would call almost like what we would call a false swear, and that can be a problem with the board. The incident, it's sometimes the saying is always the cover-up's worse than the crime, I guess. If you've had something 15 years in the past for whatever, and you thought it was a minor thing, but you got fingerprinted for it, you have to provide that information. So those are the 2 big things that the staff have said hold up a lot of, this is for the exam staff, hold up a lot of applications. And a lot of this applies to endorsement as well. And if I run over time, just let me know.
You're free.
Okay. All right. Anyhow, so the next thing, and there's some other ones that they said, listen, this doesn't happen that often, but we sometimes get photos of selfies with other people in them, people making duck face. She showed me one today. Someone took a photo of her in her wedding dress, sending it in. You have to, all they want is a plain background. They want a plain background, and they want a photo that it says, I know 6 months, within the last 6 months. I don't know how the board of staff will know if the photo was taken in 2015 versus 2017, but a recent photo, because I guess they have to match this up when you're going to Pearson Vue, so you should look you shouldn't look like, if you're 48, you shouldn't send in your college photos from 1988, okay? But these are minor things, and they said, listen, this is a small percentage, but even a small percentage, if you're talking 0.05%, but you're getting in 5,000 applications, well, then you're talking 20, 30, 50 applications. So these all add up, and we want to, these incremental things, if we can reduce these, it allows the application staff to review applications quicker. So that's so the photos is a small one. They also said make sure the addresses are accurate. They get a lot of addresses that on the application don't put in apartment 7, they put in the address. These are just things that people forget, but they say this happens more often than you would think. The address isn't correct. If a letter goes out, somehow doesn't get delivered, it comes back to us. You've already wasted now 2 weeks for the letter that nobody knows about, the person doesn't even know about, to come back to us. So then another outreach has to occur. It becomes more difficult. Now we have to check the system, we have to, the staff member now has to make the call, try to get in touch somehow with that person. This happens a little bit more, not as much, it happens a lot more with home health aides than with nurses, but it's still an issue. Uploading, an interesting thing that the staff that I hadn't thought about, we now have the upload feature that I'm sure you're all aware of, I hope you're all aware of. Now you can upload, as of March 8th, you can upload documents directly, scan them, send them in. The staff says the best way is, even if it takes you an extra day or two, upload the documents all together. Because when you upload them Tuesday, and then you upload another document Thursday, and you upload another document the Monday after, the staff is not going to be able, the staff is not looking at your application every day. Okay, they are human, they have to look at all these applications. So when you have a complete application, you should be mailing it in so the staff can say, okay, we've got the photo, they've got the name change, they've got the whatever, immigration documents if necessary, they've got everything lined up here, and we have the letter of completion from the school. That's what they want to see. But if you're emailing or scanning in piecemeal, it becomes more difficult for the staff. So this is another issue that, again, these are not big issues like the first two, but if you're talking, even if 1-2% of all applications come in and you add in all these things, now you're talking 5, 10, 15% of the applications have these kind of issues, which means there's another point of contact with the board. Another issue they mentioned is, okay, we've got the arrests, the uploading supporting documents, name change, make sure you provide the right documentation. If you've been married, they say that they run into problems where they get the birth certificate doesn't match the name now, people don't put in their marriage certificates. I'm not very familiar with this process, but I know they say that this happens. And so you have to be cognizant of the fact, again, the key is getting as complete an application as possible. And what I would recommend is that the schools themselves, if they can, to help out some of these applicants that are applying. I don't know, I'm sure it's a burden on the schools as well to go and check, depending on the number of people that are being are matriculating from the court from their school. But it's something that we are going to talk about with all the schools at another time. It's sort of one of the future things that we'd like to do. But these are all things that I think can help with the exam application. But the big one is Pearson Vue and the criminal background. These are two big ones that they've said. I think I've got everything for exam. A lot of this stuff applies obviously to the endorsement application as well. So I'm going to move on to if you have questions, I guess we'll just hold it to the end, and then you can ask about anything and everything. Now the endorsement application obviously is a bit different. Endorsement application, talking with staff, there were some shocking things that I learned in talking to staff. They quoted me a figure of about 50% of all applications come in with some sort of deficiency. Now, what's interesting is the 50% of that 50%, 70% of that 50%, so 35% of all endorsement applications, the biggest issue they have is the verification. They said, we get applications with, when we check the individual has not paid for either nurses, they have to pay nurses, which is, I believe it's 45 states, they haven't paid for nurses, they haven't paid the state that they've already been licensed in, and those states are, and I had to memorize this, California, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Hawaii, and apparently Louisiana for LPNs as well. I'm not 100% sure on that, but they're not paying that state. And they also told me 50% of all, I was shocked, I said, are you certain about this? They said, easily 50% of all the applications, I guess, and you know this more than most, than probably anybody, the number of the endorsement applications, a lot of these are, I guess, traveling nurses. They get licensed in many, many states. They said 50% of all the applications have a California license. Now, according to them, California is the worst state to get a verification from. They say it takes 3 months. They wait for the check to clear before they send us the verification. You're shaking your head, so I guess you've had experience of this. I'm not knocking California, but I'd rather throw California under the bus. But California, 50% of the applications from endorsement have a California, the individual has a California license. So 35% of all applications, they haven't either paid for nurses, they haven't paid the state, or they haven't paid nurses in the state if they're obviously part of the 45 states that are part of nurses, and they have a license with one of the 5 states I mentioned. Obviously, it goes without saying, but the key is they should be paying before they apply to New Jersey Board of Nursing, because once they apply, if we check nurses or we don't have the verification from the state, again, it's another point of contact that they have to send out a notice saying, please be advised, you haven't paid for this. A letter goes out, a letter comes back, it takes time. The other issue, which is not related to any individual, again, the fingerprinting, the other issues that I mentioned, the name changes, the immigration, which I failed to mention last time, immigration documents, they have to check this, Homeland Security, it's called SAVE. I don't know what SAVE stands for, but it's checking, obviously, the legal status of the person to work in the country. The other issue with the endorsement, which obviously is an issue, is that we have to send out, for fingerprinting, we send out these old ink and roll forms. So if you're based in Ohio, we send out ink and roll forms that you have to, we send them out via paper. It's the old form where you have to then go get, you go to your local police department, get the ink and roll, they take that card and then they send it back to us and we send it down, and then it gets sent to MorphoTrust, who then digitally scans the photos, digitally scans the fingerprints that are on the old card. And then they send it out for, obviously, for review by the FBI and the state police. What I've heard staff say, and I've recommended to people, not just for nurses, but any individual, it's just the way things are right now. There are a bunch of, and I have a list of about, I don't know, 100, 200, 300 zip codes that if, essentially I'm going to break that, if you're within 10 miles of the New Jersey border, there's a lot of counties, I guess, in Delaware and Pennsylvania, New York, they say you must come to New Jersey to get your fingerprints, and there's a list of zip codes that you have to come to New Jersey. But I would recommend that if you live 3 hours away in Pennsylvania, the fingerprint form that you get says you have a choice. You can go do the ink and roll, or you can make an appointment with a MorphoTrust location in New Jersey. If you're 3 hours away, if you're 4 hours away, and you're coming to visit family in New Jersey, or you think you're going to move here soon, it makes sense, instead of the ink and roll, which may take 4 to 6 weeks because of the way we send it out. You go get you go to your local department, police department, you send back the forms, it gets sent to MorphoTrust. It can take 4 to 6 weeks to get those results back. We do get the results back if you come to New Jersey. Sometimes we get them in 2 days, but we say an average of about anywhere between 5 and 7 days. Sometimes it comes back quicker, sometimes it doesn't. It's whatever the FBI, the state police, how quickly they can get to the fingerprints. But I think it's I think it's not a bad move if you're an applicant coming from another state in the surrounding area. Even if you live in California and you think you're moving to New Jersey and you have family out here, if you don't want to wait 4 to 6 weeks for those fingerprints to get developed is not the right word, but scanned and reviewed, you make the choice, you call up, you get your appointment in New Jersey, you come into New Jersey, you get it done, and you go back. This is something that at some point I hope that the Morpho Trust people, because I know they have locations all throughout the country. I don't know when the Morpho Trust in California, and this I don't understand. This is out of our, obviously this part is out of our control. I don't know when systems will talk to each other, but for now, we have the ink and roll for out-of-state applicants, unless you come into the state itself. The other thing, there's some other things. So the one thing that's surprising is the 50% coming from California. Another thing that shocked me, and this just gives you the idea of sometimes what the staff deal with. I saw yesterday that they had over 100 verifications sitting in files. The people hadn't applied yet. They just had the verifications from the state. So obviously they put in to pay for the verification that they said they were essentially going to apply to New Jersey, but they haven't applied yet. So the staff have to check these 100 applications, 100 verifications every so often to make sure that, to see if an application came in for these individuals. So these are small issues, but again, these are the kind of things that the staff deal with on a daily basis. On the application, they said another big issue with endorsement is on the application, people list out, and I think it's the wording on the application itself has to be changed to make it a little bit more clearer. That they say list out all licenses in other states, I believe, and in New Jersey. They say, inevitably, there's many people that throw in, I was a CNA 20 years ago, I have an EMT license, and then they fail to mention, oh, by the way, I'm licensed in California as a nurse, or oh, by the way, I'm licensed in Alabama as a nurse. These are issues that they see constantly. So that's the endorsement application in a nutshell. What we're going to do now, and we've gotten a lot of feedback, and obviously, I heard the hearing and whatnot, and the acting director, Sharon Joyce, also mentioned this. There's a few things. One is, and I know we have an email already in place that people can, we have an email, if you go on the website, you can email a name change email. There's an email if somehow you don't have your fingerprint form. There's also a general email for Ask Consumer Affairs email. You can ask the board of nursing. We're going to be creating, and it should be, I'm going to email Judy and probably all the schools within the next week or so when we go live with this other email. This other email will be monitored on a daily basis of any questions about applications to come in. Because we heard the call center, a lot of problems. I don't want to say a lot. We've heard a lot of complaints about the call center, misinformation. We talk with the call center all the time to make sure that their information is accurate. Sometimes, apparently it's not accurate. We talk to the call center, but in addition, we want to give this other avenue for people to contact the board. You will receive a response very quickly. What you'll receive is most likely an auto response saying, thank you very much for your inquiry, we'll get back to you as soon as possible. You will receive a response back about the status of your application. The one thing I'd like to say is that recently, and I understand why, but recently the staff has gotten a lot of emails and calls have come in where people have literally applied. Today we had somebody who applied yesterday that called for their status of their application today. There are humans that are looking at the application. I know it's an auto process where it's an online application. It's still, all the documentation has to be reviewed by a human. So give it a few days before you call the board with a status update on the application. You can always check you have your own checklist that you can check, but as I mentioned, there are humans. A day after you send in the application, probably not, your application is not going to be the one that they're reviewing that day. So I want the message to be spread, and we'll spread it through Judy, and we'll spread it through the schools of the state, obviously, that there's this new way of, and we'll put it on the website as well, that you can contact the Board of Nursing. I think it's called Nursing Updates and then we have that long email that we have for the state. It's going to be monitored on a daily basis, so you will get a prompt response to your inquiries. The other thing is, I mentioned before, that we're taking a look at the application again. There are some things that, certain things like register for Pearson Vue before you apply. We're going to highlight it over and over and over again, maybe bold it, maybe put it in 18 font, whatever it is to get the word out more. It's just human nature. I mean, I don't blame anybody. It's a long application, but people forget. People haven't done something before they apply. We want to highlight certain things in the application more, make it a little bit more clear, so we're going to be doing that. The other thing I also mentioned briefly is that I guess several years ago, when George Ebert was executive director, he used to have these, and I don't know what they were called, but meetings with all the schools. I don't know what they're called. We're going to bring that back to get feedback from the schools and then talk to them about various things, how they can help. And this is particularly for exam applicants more than endorsement. So we're going to bring that back to really talk with the schools, and we'll probably give the similar talk and get feedback from them and saying, well, you know what, this doesn't work really, or we can't do this, or hey, we can help out here, or maybe we can help facilitate X, Y, and Z. So these are some of the things that we're going to be doing. And obviously, I know that we're in the 21st century, and email should be used more often. We are working towards using that more often. I know staff at times will email people directly. It's got to be more consistent, and we're working on a process whereby documentation can be sent via email, and maybe the letter is attached to that. It's a work in progress. So we're working towards a more email-friendly system. That way we reduce, obviously, the letter that takes a week to get to you and the week it takes for us to get the letter. So there's some of the things that we're working on at the board. And I think Barbara's not here yet. So what I'll do is I'll answer questions to the best of my ability, and then we'll wait for Barbara, and hopefully she'll be able to answer the more esoteric nursing questions about the algorithm. So I appreciate your time. Listen, I really appreciate you letting me speak here today, and I want to thank Judy and Ben very much for inviting the state here. They're interesting times we live in, I'll say that. But I do appreciate you letting me speak, and I am here to answer any questions to the best of my ability, and I have my card. So if anybody has any questions, yes?
The mic's on. Hi, I'm Edna Cadmus. I'm the Executive Director for the New Jersey Collaborating Center for Nursing. My question is, during the summer, I worked with the Board of Nursing in terms of looking at workforce data. We asked that the questions on the licensure be changed. I've yet to hear back from the board. I sent a letter in September to all of the members of the board through your top of the organization, and we're still waiting to know what the changes are. It's a very time-sensitive issue because licensure for next May comes around very quickly, and I know that you need to make those changes. I understand you were looking at potentially NERCI. I gave a comparison of NERCI and the workforce centers and what the national data is. So I'm just curious as to what the status of that is, if you would know that.
Okay, I don't know the status of that. I did recall, this was a conversation because Dorothy had brought it up. This is going back, you said last summer?
This past summer, I sat down with the Board of Nursing, and then I sent a letter in September asking for follow-up.
I will follow up with that because I don't know the answer. I just tangentially have heard that, Dorothy and I didn't know about the September letter, but I'll follow up on that because I might be saying this a lot, but it's not my bailiwick in terms of the the collaborative center, but I'll follow up with that. If you, the letter was sent to, can you tell me?
To you and to the rest of the people, unfortunately.
When, I don't have a letter. Can you email it to me?
I can,
Thank
because
you.
that's how I sent it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
God, these mics are awful high. Hi, I'm Joanne Pietro. I have a question. Are the reinstatement applications online, or are those only paper still?
The reinstatement are not online, nor are the foreign foreign exam application, which apparently is not an insignificant amount. We're working towards that, but they say it's about 5-10% of applications coming from foreign exam applicants as well, but they're not online yet.
And then what about if your reinstatement application is deficient and it comes back and you have to send documents to the board? Those still have to be paper. We can't upload those and.
I believe so, yes.
And there are a couple of tricky questions on the application form. So who's in charge of the language of the questions?
Language of questions are always reviewed by a division of law. The application itself, just to make sure, especially the crime questions and the medical
Yes.
condition questions. And I know that this has gone through, I don't want to say many iterations, but I believe that this has been thoroughly studied, but it's.
Well, it has gone through some iterations, but they still wind up being of issue. And I can't think of the 3 questions off the top of my head, but perhaps I can send you an email or a letter about them, and you can take a look at them, because I frequently counsel people on what is that question really asking and what do you have to provide.
Okay.
And they are a little different, I think, from the Board of Medical Examiners questions when it comes to health issues, and there's always a concern for American with Disabilities Act protection for people who have to reveal certain things. So I'll email you on that as well, if you
Yes.
wouldn't mind.
Thank you. This is happy and sad.
Hi, Linda Carigliano, Region 2. Just a question in regards, if you can answer this. The monies that are paid for our licenses that we paid to the Board of Nursing, can you explain where all that money goes, what it's used for, and what comes back to actually nursing?
I can't, I just know the breakdown is 120 for I just know the breakdown of the fees themselves. It's 75 for the application fee, 120 for licensure, and I believe $5 for ramp. But,
I'm sorry, that's not.
no, I know that's your question. I don't
I wanted to
know.
know what you guys do with the money.
Yeah, I knew that, and I wasn't trying to dodge. That's not something in under my purview that I know about. I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Leo Dorado. I served the board for 10 years, and when I was there, we were lacking for many staff. Particularly, I'm an educator, so there were no replacement of education specialists who have left the board. It's very, very concerning. For many years, all those people who have left have no replacement, and one of the functions of the board is the implementation of the educational regulation. I guess there's really no one looking at accreditation of schools and educational regulations at this point. I mean, I guess for us educators, I guess we should ignore it because nobody really is looking at us. So whether we submit our self-study or not, nobody's following us out. So I think it's so important to really look at the presence of educational specialists at the board.
Well,
I'll jump in. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I'll jump in here. Last week, the NJSNA was invited and we gave testimony at the legislative oversight hearing around concerns with the Board of Nursing. We did Oprah request the budget. The budget is very unclear. There are a lot of lines in there that are budgeted with no expenditures. So there was a call for some clarity on that. There has been, NJSNA has called for, along with several other agencies, the filling of positions within the Board of Nursing with appropriately credentialed people. The posting for the executive director, which is actually titled executive secretary, has been downgraded from BSN to a BS degree or a BA degree, preferably in nursing.
But you have to have a driver's license.
Yes, you do have to have a driver's license, yes. And so
I love that part.
we have asked that those positions over education, disciplinary, and licensing be filled. We also questioned why the executive director position was not filled after the last vacancy. The response we got from the representatives at the Division of Consumer Affairs was that no other board had it. We're the largest board. So it's like, okay, so we have asked that that be reevaluated, and we have asked that the minimum be for hiring be a graduate degree, preferably doctoral, over the education department. There are currently 2 consulting RNs. One oversees the education, Leo. She is doctorally prepared. However, there is no staff to go out and to make the site visits to the schools. This is problematic in that it has been reported to us that there are 2 schools who needed to be closed 2 years ago. They are still admitting and graduating students. There are some real issues, and so we have to get that back. And so NJSNA did give our testimony about what we want. We have also asked for metrics around the outsourced call center in terms of quality, accuracy, and cost. If that can't be provided, then perhaps it would be more cost effective to pay a few staff members to come in. One of the other groups asked if there were sufficient staff. We were assured that there are sufficient staff and they're hiring more. So is it sufficient staff or we have to hire more? Becomes the question. So we were there, we did try to give our feedback, we did make recommendations of what we needed and timelines for that. The nurse attorneys gave very accurate information about how it stalls their clients, especially those who have licenses in suspension and revocation. So there are a bunch of things that are being looked at from the quality oversight, and I think the association has taken its stance and given its testimony as best we possibly can.
Hi, if I could just expand. Kathy Gialinella, by the way, and I'm a nurse attorney, and I do represent licensees before the Board of Nursing. And in addition to the concerns about the education, we as nurse attorneys are concerned about how long it does take for disciplinary matters to be resolved. And it may not even be a formal disciplinary situation. It might be a report under the Cullen Law where a nurse has been reported to the board and an investigation needs to be conducted. It can take a very long period of time because it seems that there's not enough staff handling the work that has to be done to gather all the information needed to review that information and come to a conclusion. And usually I find that most of the cases, and I think Joanne would agree with me, they get resolved without any disciplinary action being taken. But in the meantime, that nurse, although they still hold their license, it's still active because of the Cullen Law, Their former employer is reporting them as having been reported to the Board of Nursing, to prospective employers. So it makes it very, very difficult for those nurses to move on to find gainful employment once they've lost a job at one facility and have been reported to their professional board by their employer. They can't get future employment. So I've had clients that have been without work for 18 months, 2 years, even longer sometimes, because it does take a very long time for the board to process the information. They get it from the hospital, for example, that has fired the nurse, and the board staff has to do certain things to gather more information. Then they have to gather information from the licensee. Then all that information has to be reviewed. Then it has to be placed on the board, the full board's agenda, and the full board has to review all that information. They're reviewing 250 disciplinary cases a month, and I don't know how the board members are really getting that done. They must be spending a lot of time, and it's a volunteer position. So if there were more help, or if there was some system where some of these could be administratively dismissed without having to go through a lot of the bureaucracy that I'm experiencing right now, that would be very helpful. So,
I think to follow up on that, Kathy, the appointment of all of the board members, well, we're in a little period now where it's a kind of, let's see how we can move forward. And from the Division of Consumer Affairs, they have put in some auditing mechanisms to see if you agree with me that that's what we heard at the oversight hearing last week. So we've seen some movement forward. We still have to see where we're going with it. So I think, there's been a little movement.
I appreciate your comments. I just wanted to say that the nursing, the Division of Law, expends a lot of resources for the Board of Nursing. They have probably, I think they have the biggest contingent, obviously the biggest board, the biggest contingent of attorneys working on these cases than any other board. So I understand your sentiments, but.
Yeah, and just to, I think, give a perspective on answering some questions as to the money, I think we learned that the Board of Nursing brings in about $13 million in fees, but our budget is about $2.2 million, and $1 million of that money is swept and goes to the DAG side. This is what Dr. Carolina had mentioned to me. And I think the big problem is what is happening, and I think it happens to all of the boards, that the governor elects, and when those fees come in, the state takes our money and then appropriates money back to the Board of Nursing. I as a nurse would say that the state's stealing our money, but as an attorney, I understand our process of not all monies that are generated by every agency is maintained or held on by that state agency, and some does go to the state. But for us, as being the largest board and having so many licensees and doing something that's so important for the public, we are hamstrung by the lack of funding that comes to our board. Our other issue is that I believe when Dr. Murphy came on board, which was about 2000 and I want to say 10 years ago, there were 81 staff members. We are now down to 31. We only have one registered professional staff member, unlike the Board of Medical Examiners, which is staffed primarily by licensed physicians. So, we've got a real issue of being able to protect the public, being able to move ahead with a nursing agenda to move our profession forward. But this, it all comes down to this money, and more money should come back. And Howard, we're putting you in charge again. No, we're just because we're gonna know any hospital you go to. I'm telling you, Howard, because we all know how to do CPR, but we could forget. I'm just kidding, Howard.
My legal name change will be. Exactly. I do want to say one thing to comment. My understanding is that the Board of Medical Examiners only has one physician, one physician on staff. I don't think they have many, if you can point me to that, because my understanding is they have a medical director. I don't know if any, they're board members, but I don't know if any other staff members.
We'll get you that information.
Okay, thank you. Additionally, again, not to push back too much, but we looked at the numbers of employees, and since we went back to 2010, so I can't comment on 2007, but it's been consistently about 30. In addition to the 31 we have now, or 30 we have now, somebody just retired. We do have temporary employees that are. I understand they're temporary employees, but they are working full-time jobs as temporary employees. So I understand that.
Are they nurses?
No, they're not nurses. The nurse we have on staff is Deb
Friends and
Zuccarelli.
family of the governor, from what Dr. Murphy has told us. That's what she calls the program anyway, but she could say those things now that she's no longer the president of the board. But, and that's, and I know you don't know any of that, Howard, but our other problem is when Kathy was mentioning about the disciplinary actions. Because of the Cullen Law, what's happening is, since our board handles 250 disciplinary cases a month, the disciplinary actions, or policing the profession, is driving the Board of Nursing. That's why, we perceive that we don't see our applications getting processed. We see the board getting bogged down with the policing that needs to be done, and that's part of their function. But the focus is all there, and there's no staff to do anything else. So again, the policies and things that need to be done to advance nursing don't get done. Our schools of nursing are struggling. We've got schools that should be closed and are open. I mean, what does that say to the public? So this is like the craziest thing, and with more staff, we could certainly get those cases adjudicated quicker. And get other things that the board needs to do back on track. But we need the staff to do that.
And I also, just to comment what Ben said, we also, as you know, new board members were just sworn in. Leo, to your point, 2 new educators by statute are now on the board. We have our consultants as well, Gail being one of them. But I have to say that the board members, they took on, they're without doubt some of the hardest working board members of all 47 boards, because as you mentioned, there are approximately 250, 300 cases, disciplinary cases a month they go through. As you know, you were there, so they work extremely hard. They put in more than their 1-2 days to a month. They come in once a month, but I'm sure they're reviewing the material. The agendas are enormous, and it's a very dedicated bunch of people that
Who don't get paid.
who don't get paid.
They don't get lunch and they don't get coffee. Nothing.
I just have one more follow-up suggestion. Thank you for the email available. There will be an email for schools of nursing maybe. It's like point of contact. Who would respond within 24 hours maybe? I think it should be transparent. Let's say the advanced practice nursing application, there should be a point of contact person. Educational issues, there should be a point of contact person. And even 36 hours is even fine to respond. But you know what I tell my students, for them to get their application going, go to the board, walk there. And that's how they were able to get things processed. Because when they call, they could call until their hair is turned white. No one responds. And sometimes somebody responds, it's incorrect. But I hope you're fixing that. But I hope that the transparency in terms of the point of contact for every issue would help and make it available at the website, because those things are not available at the website. So that would minimize phone calls, and at least an email address would be fine.
I have a suggestion. I used to teach nursing students at Seton Hall and Felician, a couple places, and just as an adjunct, but it was usually about the legal aspects of nursing. And I'd always give the students an assignment. I would give them the application to fill out as an assignment, and then we would go through the application all together. And I know the plan is to go out to the schools, but you probably can't do that all the time. One of the thoughts that I had, now that it's an electronic application, I don't think you can access it unless you're actually applying, is that correct? So there should be a sample application posted on the website so that students can access that application and see what those questions are that are being asked. Because once you go online, you're not, you're looking at the questions and trying to answer them in real time, and that's sometimes a very difficult thing to do. So you might go online, see you have to get certain information, then you have to go offline, you have to gather the information. So having a sample available, I think, would be extremely helpful. And then the other comment I have is, I had a client who applied for a Florida license recently by endorsement. She was licensed here in New Jersey, and she got fingerprinted in Cranford, New Jersey for her Florida license, and I'm not sure which service was being used.
It has to be more functional. I
Unless
think they're the only game in
that's
town.
the only one.
I
Yeah,
think.
but Florida accepted that, whereas another nurse who wanted to apply for endorsement in California had to go to the local police and do what, New Jersey requires. So I know the service is out there, and hopefully we can.
I don't think it's a New Jersey requirement. I think it's more of a, don't quote me on this, I think it's more of a technological issue with more features. I don't know why they can do it and get licensed, get fingerprinted in Cranford and get licensed in Florida.
Yeah, and she did. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I don't think Barbara's here yet.
So I have, well, so just
I'm being so nice to Howard, he knows. Listen, he's the guy with the power, he's the one who usually yells at me, so.
And I will say you're very correct. You are being very nice to Howard.
Right, I am good. Another issue that came up, I know we've been talking about the applications, and our time frame in Jersey seems to be from the time, if you get everything in and you get it in properly, we're looking at what, 6 weeks?
I think it depends. It's interesting that I failed to mention, one of the things we did in 2015, we noticed that there was a way to, we saw was a way to license people quicker after they took the exam. Not pre-exam, but after they took the exam. We saw that there was more of a delay. After they took the exam, they weren't getting licensed right away. So we went back, we looked at the process, and we figured out a way to really download the results from NCLEX very quickly, and then essentially put them into 3 buckets. The buckets being passed, and they get licensed, passed but have some sort of problem still, and then failed. And instead of scanning them first and dealing with the deficiencies, we were able to start, once you pass the exam, you're licensed within 24 to 48 hours. And we have that process. In the summer, obviously, it takes a little bit longer, but that process worked. I wish, what I want it to become is an urban legend, an urban myth that in 2017, I took the exam and it took a month to get licensed after I took the exam. I want that for people in 2019 to say, what are you talking about?
Right.
I mean, this is the goal. I mean, I think every organization, I think you all can agree, strives for operational excellence. And I think we're in a good spot. I think we're working harder to improve. There's always improvements that can be made.
And we have a lot of money, and we should be using our money to improve that technology further. Talk about the urban legend. So we're still not at that point, because I send friends and family to New York, and even I know our own board of nursing members send family to other states, because in New York, once you pass the NCLEX, 24 hours, you have a license. I think we should be able to do that in our great state, right, Howard? Because you're going to work on that, right?
Just check.
Hi, my name is Sandy Foley. I've heard a lot of what are the problems, but I'm just wondering, what do you see as changes that are going to be happening so we can move on and so we can help the educators and we can help the people that need to be reinstated, do you find that, are you thinking about, or, you know, what are the changes that are coming about? And I know, you know, what has just
Right.
been done, but just wondering.
Right, well, I mean, I think, again, we always try and refine the process so it's a little bit better. We're working on the new computer system that we use for the online applications. There are quirks sometimes. You know, things happen. I'm not a tech person, but things happen technologically that on occasion, the renewal site for various things isn't up for 6 hours. It's internet-based. It happens. Things like this occur. So we're working to fix that from a technological side, and also just in talking to the staff and talking to everybody here. The improvements are process improvements that I think they're very feasible to do. I can't cite a specific, like, oh, well, now person A is going to be looking at an application at this juncture, and they'll only look at this point. It's looking at the application in its entirety, online, and the staff as well, and looking at processes for better workflow. So I can give a much better answer than that.
Hi, Mary Ellen Levine, Region 1. Something that has keeps coming up in my mind is this May backlog. A number of years ago, they started splitting the renewal time so that it offset when nurses were renewing.
Each year they do it, right.
Why May? Why are we not advancing the license for registered nurses who are presently licensed to move to a September date? Or why is it, like, what's the magic number? Like, you know, it's like.
Is this for, I'm sorry, is this for renewal?
For renewal, yes. I just, you know, it seems like it's just the date I keep hearing, so I'm not really sure why we didn't go to a different month.
I don't know, I just know that renewal is.
Well, maybe that's a suggestion, perhaps, that is something.
Oh, okay. I mean,
May
you
31.
can answer
May
that?
31st.
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe it's a suggestion that maybe when we're gonna
I
do
think
that.
Ben can answer this, but I wanted to say that one thing before Ben speaks is that the renewal itself is very different than the initial application. Renewal is, and for everybody that's gone through it, I'd like to say it's fairly harmless to use the term. It's it could take, you know, I hear sometimes it takes 10, 15, 20 minutes, but you're paying, you're renewing, and you're done. That's not an issue. I think it's a dual track with initial applications, but and Ben, you can speak more to the other point.
At the legislative oversight hearing, this issue came up, and it was about the influx of money around May, June, July. And then all of that money was taken out because it looks like it's so much, and then we're only given a little bit back. So one of the suggestions that came up was, why not, as we do for driver's license now, have nurses renew on their birthday?
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Munoz has introduced, or she's introducing legislation.
It's done.
It has been introduced to change that from a May date to the birthday. Now, that will even out the flow of money, and so you won't have all of this money coming in. It's going to be a nightmare for employers to try to keep up with whose license has to be verified. But that has been introduced. So that's one solution that was presented at the oversight hearing. It was heard right away, and she tried to put that out there. I think, you know, I'm not here to put Mr. Pine on a pillory and flog him. Many of these issues rise above him at a higher level on the food chain. And so what we are continuing to monitor for NJSNA are things like temporary employees being used in crush time, and then they go away. The other issue is there is a title of position called, I believe it's government assistant? Government representative. And what you have with the temps and the government representatives is they do not report to the executive director of the Board of Nursing. They're just sent down, do the work, but they report higher up. That's problematic. If you're paying somebody out of Board of Nursing funds who reports to somebody else, that's an additional drain on the money. It's a strain. Pardon? Thank you. You want me to get out my altar hanky? And so we want to keep an eye on that. The former DCA director, Steve Lee, sent a letter to the legislators about the issues, stating that there was no backlog. There was indeed a backlog, but I understand that it has been cleared, and so it's down now less than 10 days. But that was cleared with temporary help, so we want to continue to monitor that. Mr. Lee also wrote that there is no need for RNs to be hired to oversee the work of the board. I totally disagree with that, and I think NJSNA will stand in opposition to that. You would never have a physician, an attorney, or any other professional person saying there's no need for physician oversight of physicians, no need for attorney oversights of attorneys. So that's another area in which we will keep close tabs.
Thank you. And at this point, I'd also like to take opportunity to make a comment on behalf of nurses who are trying to practice in New Jersey from out of state. That, you know, I've recently, because of all of the information that's out in the media now, are hearing from nurses that are waiting months and months, not able to work, have jobs that are not being held because it's going on 6 months that they cannot get a license in New Jersey. So I just wanted to put that out there as well, speak on behalf of that population as well. The backlog with the growing student population, you know, also understanding the problem with the certification of the programs, but still those really hardcore, you know, putting out good nursing students, good graduates that are waiting. In addition to that, you also have the, you know, the other nurses who are trying to practice here in the state and are not able to, and they're licensed and, you know, ready to go. So I just wanted to make that comment as well.
I appreciate that, and I also one thing I like to say is that when talk to home health aid agencies and owners of those agencies, I said email me if you ever have a problem with a person. Now I know this is not a stopgap measure, but I want to know if there are individuals out there. Obviously, sometimes we find people that should have been licensed, and we find them and we do the proper thing, we license them right away. But if you hear of anybody, I have no problem with you emailing me directly and saying, what's the status of this individual?
Can I take my responsibility?
Absolutely. So, you know, it's a check for me, so I can keep with, you know, check with the other administrative people, the executive director and the assistant deputy director, to check with them and check with staff and say, hey, if this is an issue, let's find out where the issue is. We do get one-off issues. It happens in every board that somebody, I don't want to call slip through the cracks, but you know, there's an application, this person was waiting, what happened? Okay, people are human, they make mistakes. I just don't want to see that it's a consistent problem. So I appreciate it. Anybody can email me directly, because I like to know that, because it's great feedback for me to find out what's out there.
Hi, Linda Carrigiano, Region 2. Could you just explain to me, it was mentioned before that there were 81 staff members at one point, and now you're down to 30. Usually in most cases it's attrition or improvement on technology. I don't hear the whole lot of improvement on technology. Can you explain why the difference and the change and what happened?
Well, first off, the 81 figure, I mean, I have not heard that 81 figure. We looked back to 2010, the numbers have been the same. It's been 30 or 31, 29 from 2010 to now. In addition, we have these additional temp staff. So I can't comment on the 81 because that's not a number that I've heard of. That's number one. In terms of the technology does make improvements. I think staff have to get used to certain technology. It takes time to get used to a certain technology. We have a new licensing system. We have using what we call SharePoint, which is a new, I don't know, some people are familiar with the SharePoint system. there's a new workflow, so they're allowed to upload documents. These are all improvements in the system. There are times when technology doesn't work as well as we'd like, but the technology will continue to improve. I don't think it's going to hurt the board. The technology will improve overall going forward, as I think it has helped the Board of Nursing and all the boards for that matter. So I just see continued improvements in the technology side, but I can't comment on the 80 versus 30 because I just don't know that number 80. I do know that for my time there, the staff has been pretty consistent with the numbers themselves.
We're gonna take one last question.
Hi, Joanna Penn. I have a question and a comment, really. Obviously, the brilliant Dr. Dorothy Carolina and Dr. Pat Murphy focused on what's going on with the Division of Consumer Affairs and the Board of Nursing. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't even be here tonight having this conversation, and this would have continued endlessly. We're going to have a new administration coming in January. It seems like the focus is moving forward and we're going to make some headway. What's going to happen with the new administration? Is it going to affect the progress that we are making now just because nurses are being proactive and speaking out? Is that going to give us lag time again?
Well, I can't speak to the new administration. What I can.
With the change in administration, okay?
Well, I mean, I can't speak to that. What I can say is that the improvements are we're always working to improve and refine the process. You mentioned your second point, that the new administration. I think we're just going to continue with the progress we made. I can't comment on the next administration.
I mean, within your department, is that going to affect the new versus if it was at two years into the administration? Is this going to affect us even more now? Are you guys going to come back and say to us, well, we have a new administration now, so we really can't work on this now. We all have to get to know each other. We have to play together, and we have to, go back to kindergarten.
No, I mean, the process is that we have dedicated board members and we have dedicated staff. They're not going to be changing the staff that process applications. These are state workers that have been here, in some cases, 20, 30 years working on applications.
But they don't make the decisions.
But they're going to work on applications just like they've worked on before. I can't speak to if I can't speak.
But I don't see where that's where the decision making is.
I'm going to cut this discussion off. I think it's a little adversarial, and I'm going to cut that off. I think NJSNA has vetted both gubernatorial candidates. That is a question that you can bring to the legislative gubernatorial townhouse on Tuesday the 17th. And those are the questions where you will have representatives from Lieutenant Governor Guadagno and Phil Murphy. They can come. That's the person you need to ask. Where are they going to take this? We will continue to monitor this forward. If we begin to see this going backwards, I think we can continue to raise our voices as an association.
Thank you. That's what I want to hear.
I appreciate the question. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
We thank you for coming.
We do want to thank Howard for being here again. I think